bringing you 5 players that you need to let your Airhead Leaguemates draft in 2024. Don't fall into the trap. But before we get started, on my way to 3,000 subscribers. So if you wouldn't mind, hit that subscribe button if you are new, helping you win a fantasy football championship in 2024. And if you're a returner, hit that like button. Best free way to support the channel. Appreciate you guys. Starting off with the first player, it's going to be Deebo Samuel for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, at the time of this recording, there has been no Brandon Ayuk trade. If I'm being completely honest, based on everything that I'm seeing, Brandon Ayuk is going to remain a 49er. I think the idea of him going and playing for the Steelers or going and playing for the Patriots, I think he was hoping for a better quarterback play, and he seems like he's a pretty smart businessman, and he wants the opportunity to get another contract after this one. So I think he's going to take the 49ers money. I think this has been a little bit of a fun trade for Brandon Ayuk, create a little bit of drama, as well as the opportunity for him to potentially get that bigger contract with the 49ers. Now, with Deebo Samuel in particular, he's currently going off the board on the composite ADP as wide receiver 15, overall player 29. The fact that you're having to take him in the early part of the third round, and when we're looking at his last year points per game numbers, wide receiver 12 on a points per game basis. So you're saying, hey, you're having to draft him at wide receiver 15. Last year, he was wide receiver 12 on a points per game basis. Seems like a pretty good value to me, Caleb. I don't know why we're debating Deebo Samuel as a bad value and a player that I should let my Airhead friends draft. The thing that I'm going to say is that even though he's wide receiver 12 on a points per game basis, last year he did have 7 receiving touchdowns in 89 targets and 60 receptions. If we're looking at the year before that, where he finished as the wide receiver 28, in the 13 games that he played, he only did have 2 receiving touchdowns and averaged 13 fantasy points per game as wide receiver 28. 2021, he had wide receiver 3 points per game numbers with when he got 120 targets and he had 6 total receiving touchdowns. Now, the thing that we do have to consider with Deebo Samuel in this offense is that he is going to get a ton of rushing upside just based on the fact that they like to use him on kind of the end arounds, use him in a lot of different areas of the field. My biggest concern is if for any reason this year for Deebo Samuel, as he continues to get it up there in age, this will be his 29-year-old season. He was wide receiver 44 on targets last year, wide receiver 31 on target share, wide receiver 25 on target rate. And we're talking about a San Francisco 49ers offense that last year was a bottom 30 passing attempt team in the NFL. So if we're adding on to the fact that we don't really think that their offense, because they still have CMC, because they do like to run a ton of end arounds with Deebo, they like to do a ton of short passes to George Kittle. If we're assuming that this offense isn't going to change a lot because of Kyle Shanahan is an amazing offensive coordinator, they run a ton of great schemes, I just think there's a ton of mouths to feed in this offense to really get that overall high-end upside of a guy like Deebo. I like Brandon Ayuk. I like George Kittle essentially at cost as well as a later round tight end. I just think it's a dumb move to get involved with a Deebo type Samuel type role when he's going to be so dependent on those high-end touchdowns and those end arounds, and he just continues to get older. Last year was the 4th overall player in scoring touchdowns for fantasy football with 12. So we're essentially banking on the fact that, hey, he needs to keep this high-end touchdown upside for him to continue to return tons of fantasy football value. And even though he had the 4th most touchdowns last year, he only finished as a wide receiver 12. So let's say that even drops just a little bit. We could be talking about Deebo Samuel essentially dropping to like the wide receiver 20 on a points per game basis, which isn't terrible if you draft him at wide receiver 15. I just think there's so many better values to be had in this current range around guys like Deebo Samuel, like a DJ Moore, like a Brandon Ayuk, like a Nico Collins, like a Cooper Kupp. So for me, let your idiot league mates draft Deebo. Let me know if I'm wrong, if you are disagreeing with that down below. My second player that you need to let your idiot league mates draft, it is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. for the Indianapolis Colts. And Michael Pittman Jr. in the fantasy football world, he's been getting a ton of hype as of recent just because of the fact that we have Anthony Richardson coming back this year off of injury. Not only do we have a little bit of a Josh Downs injury, so you're assuming, hey, Michael Pittman Jr. is in for a treat. If we look at this, is going to be year 5 of Michael Pittman Jr. in the NFL. Last year was wide receiver 14 on a points per game basis with 15.6. The year before that, 13.5 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 21. Wide receiver 22 the year before that at 14 fantasy points per game. Now, I am not saying that he is bad by any stretch of the imagination because last year's 156, 141 targets. But if he's gotten that type of target level volume and he's only been able at his peak to finish as wide receiver 14 on a points per game basis, so a high-end wide receiver 2, why are we assuming that if he does this again, like his ultimate level ceiling, what is to get like 165 targets? I just personally don't see that. I don't have that in my rankings. And so for me, it's really hard to push and tell you, hey, yeah, you need to be drafting Michael Pittman Jr. at this current overall ADP, because when we're looking at his current overall ADP, wide receiver 19, overall player 35. Like we said, he's right behind guys like Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Jalen Waddle. He's ahead of guys like a DJ Moore, even a Devontae Smith in the Philadelphia Eagles offense, DK Metcalf. I like those guys a whole lot more than a guy like a Michael Pittman Jr. Yes, this is the alpha in an Indianapolis Colts offense, but what's his passing attack going to look like? Because I do like the rushing attack with an Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor. I'm a little bit worried that even if he ends up getting all of those targets, that wide receiver 14 may just be potentially his ceiling. Now, the argument that people are going to make in regards to for Michael Pittman Jr. and why, Caleb, I'm not an Airhead teammate, I'm going to draft Michael Pittman Jr., is the fact that he's had a pretty bad luck in the red zone department, where last year had 4 receiving touchdowns, the year before that had 4, and the year before that had 6. So they're saying, hey, if Michael Pittman Jr. can get up to 7 or 8 total touchdowns, we could be talking him as a back-end wide receiver 1. I think that is definitely something to be of consideration. I am still, based on the metrics, based on the numbers, yes, targets are earned, not given. Wide receiver 9 on targets last year. I understand he's a high-level target volume earner, but what can he do with those targets? Not a ton after the catch. Makes me a little bit worried. He's almost going to have like a Michael Thomas type season of absolutely demolishing the targets. Michael Pittman Jr. is a guy I am letting my Airhead teammates draft. My third player I'm letting my Airhead teammates draft is going to be Aaron Jones, running back of the Minnesota Vikings, which feels absolutely weird to say. We got the green background behind us. I guess you could say that's like Packer green, but Aaron Jones is currently going off the board as overall player 61, RB 18. And Aaron Jones essentially released by the Green Bay Packers and then signs with the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Jones will be turning 30 this year. And not that we're scared of that overall age cliff, but we've seen guys in the similar range absolutely die out of the NFL. If we're talking like last year, we saw Dalvin Cook absolutely lose his explosion, lose his legs. Now, there are special athletes, like Derrick Henry is one that I'm not necessarily worried about. Alvin Kamara, who wins a ton out of the backfield. So a lot of people are going to put Aaron Jones in that similar level conversation to a guy like Alvin Kamara. Last year, RB 26 on a points per game basis, but RB 11 on a points per game basis the 2 years before that. I think the thing is, based on that performance last year, we are getting zero discount on Aaron Jones because of the excitement of him being in this Minnesota Vikings offense with either Sam Darnold and or JJ McCarthy. So they're assuming that you have to run the ball. And now Kevin O'Connell is a good offensive coordinator. I 100% get that. But when you're having to take him ahead of guys like David Montgomery, who has a ton of touchdown upside for the Lions, James Conner, who's going to get a ton of volume for the Arizona Cardinals, Ramondre Stevenson, who's going to be playing with a rookie level quarterback, but also got a huge contract extension, it's hard for me to say, yep, Aaron Jones is valued appropriately, because can you get back to those overall RB11 numbers? I don't know. 7 to 10 touchdowns, that definitely seems doable. The part that is going to be interesting to me is if he's going to be able to maintain the 50 to 60 receptions that he's gotten the last 2 years, and especially in an offense that now you have Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, and then you add in the fact that TJ Hawkinson's going to be coming back at some point this season. I don't know how much volume of that passing work Aaron Jones is actually going to be able to get. So I have Aaron Jones as an Airhead player to let your league mates draft. You stay away. Also, another guy that you could have a little bit of debate on me down in the comments. My fourth player you need to let your Airhead teammates draft is going to be Mr. Keon Coleman for the Buffalo Bills. And hear me out with Keon Coleman. We have seen literally nothing. Some clips from training camp. That's it. Yes. Did he get second round draft capital to the Buffalo Bills, who have Josh Allen? That's huge. But there's a chance that Curtis Samuel is actually going to be the one. There's a chance that Khalil Shakir is actually going to be the one. There's a chance that Dalton Kincaid is the clear one and there's nobody else. Like, those are all within the range of possibilities for a guy like Keon Coleman. And I agree. Keon Coleman looks the part. He's super beefed up, juiced up, wide receiver. Reminds me a lot of a guy like AJ Brown or DK Metcalf coming out of school. The issue is they were a little bit more refined as route runners, just overall players in general, where we're looking at Keon Coleman and it's just a lot of projection. And even though it's a lot of projection, you're having to take Keon Coleman as wide receiver 46, which is one spot behind Jordan Addison, who did it as a rookie, 2 spots behind Ladd McConkey, who literally has 0 target competition. So it's similar, but we can understand how they're going to get Ladd McConkey the ball out of the slot. And then ahead of a guy like Jameson Williams, ahead of a guy like Cortland Sutton, ahead of a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. So really, we're living on the prayer that Keon Coleman's actually going to be the alpha, and this is the appropriate level of value. If I'm in this range, I'm not taking Keon Coleman, because I think I can get a guy like Curtis Samuel a little bit later in the draft at wide receiver 51. So you can wait a few spots, but I think Curtis Samuel's actually going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense instead of Keon Coleman. So don't be an airhead. Don't just let the rookie draft type. I think it's appropriate because we've seen these rookies in previous years absolutely emerge and have great fantasy football seasons. I would just hold the phone with Keon Coleman, because I would let your Airhead league mates draft him and not worry. And my final player you need to let your Airhead league mates draft is going to be Mr. Dallas Goedart for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Dallas Goedart is honestly an interesting one, because in 2 years previous to this, tight end 5 on a points per game basis and tight end 8 on a points per game basis. Last year it was tight end 12 on a points per game basis. I just don't know, with adding in Saquon Barkley and knowing the mouths that you're going to have to feed with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in this offense, how Dallas Goedart returns on this tight end 12 value. The only way that he really returns for me is if some sort of major injury happens. Now you're going to say to me, well, Caleb, the last 3 years, tight end 12 was his lowest points per game output. We're probably drafting him at his floor, and he has a huge ceiling. Like we said, if something were to happen to Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown. Now, I don't like to predict injuries, but I am assuming that the fact that they signed Saquon Barkley, they're going to be continuing this hard ground and pound game with a ton of play action to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Of course, Dallas Goedert's going to get involved. Of course, Dallas Goedart isn't going to be dead. I just think in this ADP range, I want a high-end shot at my tight end spot. I would much prefer a guy like Dalton Schultz, who I understand he has a ton of target competition as well. Actually has more target competition in that offense, but I think it's going to be a little bit more pass happy, and Dalton Schultz can definitely have some big boom weeks. I like Brock Bowers who's a spot ahead. I think that's pretty cut and dry why you would like Brock Bowers, elite level prospect, playing in a Raiders offense besides Devontae Adams, probably going to be the second receiving option. You got a guy like TJ Hawkinson a little bit wild down. Now, of course, you're going to have to wait on that injury and wait for him to come back, but TJ Hawkinson has a ton of upside if he were to actually get back and be fully healthy. That is a risk, I agree, but Dallas Goedert's the guy that I'm letting my AIRHEAD Leaguemates draft, and I'm not being too concerned about. So if you like fantasy football, please hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Appreciate you so much for tuning into the channel. It means the absolute world. Putting out a video a day at this point. If you haven't already, check out these 2 videos, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.